He's gonna have like a Aston Martin next time we talk to him.
Yeah, he's gonna be asking for a raise because he has to afford his new Maserati.
Hey, did you know they have Maseratis that are like $20,000?
Yeah, don't tell that to Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's I don't think you want to be the one that buys the like lowest level Maserati. I feel like if you buy a Maserati, you have to get a Maserati.
Yeah, Jordan, if you're getting a new vehicle, get yourself a tricycle, a moped, or something along those lines, something more cost effective.
Dude, you should get. I mean, you're already in a Prius, so this wouldn't be a huge difference as far as appearance goes. You should get one of those scooters, like a moped.
Yeah, there was. Hey, I had. We were talking about my sister's college graduation the other day. One of the coolest things they have on campus is they have these like motorized mopeds everywhere, and anybody could use them. You just pick it up. You swipe your credit card and you pay 50 cents per mile you go in it. And you just go wherever you want across campus. You stop, you get charged like $2 or whatever, $1.50. And that's how a lot of people get around campus.
Huh. You know what, Jordan, honestly, just get a Segway. Yeah. You're muted. Just be like straight Paul Blart. Have you tried those hoverboards, by the way? You know the hoverboards, like the ones you stand on? I think they're called hoverboards, right? They're not really hoverboards.
Yeah, they were really popular for a minute. My sister had one when she was younger that I tried going on. I wasn't like proficient at it, so I would just like fall and almost injure myself. I do think that was a big issue. A lot of people were breaking wrists on them.
That's why I asked. They scare me. I've never tried one.
Yeah, I'd rather. I think like a scooter or moped, for me at least, would be safer.
Dude, when I was a kid going down to like the boardwalk in Ocean City, New Jersey, and the Razor scooters were massive. You remember that Razor scooter craze?
Hell yeah. I had one with a little kickstand in the back so you could do tricks on it.
You could do tail whips on it and stuff.
Yeah.
Those are sick. There was also a point at the Ocean City boardwalk where laser pointers. I don't know if that's a little bit before your time. I was pretty young. And then they had to stop doing it because people were blinding others on the boardwalk and everywhere else. But yeah, like there's always that craze, that fad. Jordan can bring the Segways back, baby. We'll be in business. Anyway, hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Live Before Lock Show. We've got, I mean, not a great slate, really. You got 3 games on the day slate, 3 games on the night. Greg and I figured we'll hit the early slate first, then we'll tackle the night slate because there's no live before lock tonight, right? Just NBA.
Yeah, just NBA today. We'll cover both the 3-game slates here. It was, I mean, what we're gonna if we did like 2 3-game slate shows, we'd just be stretching it out without that much to talk about.
Yeah, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So let's go ahead and let's make it happen. 3-game early slate, Coors Field as well. I don't know if you've looked yet. I assume you have. The weather at Coors Field is not particularly good. It's sub 50 degrees at Coors. The total's below 10. So, like, yes, it's a Coors slate, but this is not your traditional 3-game Coors slate where just everybody 100% jams the game. Now, I'm not saying that's not going to happen because you've got Logan Gilbert and Pablo Lopez in the same game with an incredibly low total in this one. But it is interesting to me just seeing that this is one of the lower totals that you'll see at Coors all year, regardless of pitching. And a lot of that has to do with weather. It's chilly there. You could almost say cold, and winds are actually blowing in 11 miles per hour from center field.
Yeah. And also we saw yesterday, I'm kind of curious to see what ends up happening today with ownership, but Coors Field was not all that popular yesterday. In fact, The Rockies were insanely unpopular. I was like the only one who played them in single entry yesterday. Jordan Hicks was chalky pitching against them. The Rockies were really good. So
Was
I
that
got
the
good
night
results.
slate?
Yeah, the night
Yeah, I
slate.
didn't
And
play the
then
night slate.
also the Giants, even on the other side, we had the Giants with like a 16% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate, and they weren't all that popular yesterday either. So people seem to have soured a little bit on Coors Field lately. That's probably going to change today, though, just because it's only a 3-game slate this afternoon. But who knows? We don't have that lineup yet for the Giants. We do have them projected to be the chalkiest team on the slate, but they came in underneath their ownership projections yesterday. The lineup isn't out. If the lineup isn't out before lock, maybe that will prevent people from rostering them a little bit.
Well, I mean, just look at our top stacks tool for a second. And for what it's worth, like you have weather in this Arizona Cincinnati game, rain. So that kind of sucks, but you're probably just going to play that anyway. It's not the same as yesterday when you and I basically started the show by saying we were fading completely, just Xing out from the contest generator and the Sims, that St. Louis Mets game. We ended up being right. It got postponed. But in a spot like this, I'm not really sure how you do that. And to your point, like lower ownership on this Coors slate. Okay, so you have 6 teams, right? 3 games. Pablo Lopez, Logan Gilbert. Both teams have 3.5 run implied totals, very low. So naturally, you'd think the ownership to this San Francisco stack would be huge. It's 27%. Cincinnati's 23%. Arizona against Hunter Green is 19%, and the Rockies are 12. So it's actually, they're not just pulling away with ownership despite being only 3 games.
Yeah. In particular, the Rockies again. I understand that people just hate playing the Colorado Rockies. We had a slate yesterday. The Rockies were 1% owned as a stack playing at Coors Field, and Jordan Hicks was chalky pitching against them. I understand it's the Rockies. They have an absolute shit offense. Any offense is in play in Coors Field. And like you said, we've got a 3-game slate. Keaton Winn is popular, and the Rockies are projected for 12% ownership. We just got the starting lineup came out for the Rockies. It's cheap as always for Colorado, and people just don't really like playing this team at all, which I understand to an extent, but it's just too far in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, ultimately, when you look at the pitchers, you've got it's pretty obvious, right? Where your 2 best pitchers are on this slate. I don't really think that's going to be any point of contention. You know, saying that on the early slate, Pablo Lopez, or I should say the 3 best pitchers, but Pablo Lopez, Logan Gilbert, and Hunter Green are the 3 best options. I will differentiate though a little bit and say that Hunter Green, I think, is a little riskier than the other 2. That doesn't mean he's not in a good spot. We have him with the 2nd highest top pitcher probability on this slate, so not to be ignored. But like you have 3 guys that are far and away your best options. With that in mind, though, like pitchers in Coors against the Rockies have performed well. And Keaton Winn, outside of that last game in Philly where he didn't make it through the first and got absolutely annihilated against a scorching hot Phillies team, he's 26% top 2 pitcher on DraftKings, 35% ownership. It's Slade Ciccone and Cal Quantrill that are getting no ownership. Look how heavily that is concentrated between 4 guys today.
Yeah, and it makes sense for a couple reasons. Number one, the offenses are not all that prohibitively priced, so you're going to have salary to pay up for pitching today. And then when you look at some of the pitchers that we have, it's not the most expensive guys in the world. We've got Logan Gilbert is $10K. Then you got Hunter Green at $8,600, Pablo Lopez at $9,300. It's honestly not all that difficult to build lineups with 1, if not 2 of the stud pitchers.
Who do you like the most?
Yeah, if I had to pick one of these guys, it's hard for me to get away from Pablo Lopez. This Mariners offense, it just strikes out so often. We've seen this time and time again. Even pitchers that aren't prolific strikeout guys, they go out and they generally have really good starts against the Seattle Mariners. The offense has been a massive disappointment this year. It's not as bad as some of the other bad offenses in the league, but it's just the amount they strike out at where we see pitchers, even if they give up a few runs to the Mariners, like Bailey Ober the other day. Bailey Ober's pitching against the Seattle Mariners. He gave up, what was it, 2 or 3 runs. He didn't even pitch that deep into the game. But in 5 innings, he strikes out 7 guys because all his team does is swing and miss.
I know. And Pablo Lopez is good. Cheaper than Gilbert. Gilbert's also good. When you look at these teams too, we're talking like against right-handed pitching this season, both of them strike out at a very high clip. The question then becomes like, what do you get driven towards if you're going Logan Gilbert, Pablo Lopez, Logan Gilbert, Green, Lopez, Green? Like, are you driven to specific spots? Are you driven to specific lineups? Because I think, us debating what pitchers are better than others is less important than trying to figure out what builds make the most sense, where you have three guys above 8,500 who are all pulling essentially 40+% ownership.
Yeah, so a couple of things about my lineups. The high-end guys, Logan Gilbert, Pablo Lopez, Hunter Green, I like all of them to some extent. Pablo Lopez is my favorite of the three of them, so I come in a little bit overweight to Pablo Lopez, and then in turn, I get a little bit underweight to Hunter Green and Logan Gilbert. There is one pitcher I very much do not like at his current projected ownership, and that is Keaton Winn. Keaton Winn, he's got this matchup against the Colorado Rockies. And yeah, the Rockies offense isn't good. Same sort of thing we went through with Jordan Hicks yesterday. But it doesn't mean that a pitcher should just blindly be chalk at Coors Field, with the Rockies offense being the second lowest owned team on the entire slate. So yesterday, the Rockies were the lowest owned offense on the slate. Today, they're the second lowest owned offense. I think it's very sensible to just be well underweight to the field on Keaton Winn, get yourself overweight to the field on Rockies stacks. And then if you need to save salary at pitcher, I would rather go to somebody like Slate Ciccone or go to Cal Quantrill for a third or a fourth of the ownership of Keaton Winn. We've got Winn projected for 35% ownership. Ciccone is 12% on. Cal Quantrill is 7% on. I just don't think there's that much that separates these cheap pitchers. None of them are good.
Yeah, you're right. It's the fact that the Rockies right now are grabbing 12% ownership. Arizona's getting 19, Cincinnati 23. Of course, Ciccone, like, fine. I understand that. They have a 4.7 run implied total. San Francisco against Quantrill, 27%. There is leverage in this Rockies team right now. And for what it's worth, and you kind of alluded to this, outside of San Francisco, there's nothing that really different. If you're just looking at this from a Vegas perspective, Greg, right? Like, forget about everything else. Just look at it from Vegas implied totals here. What really differentiates the Rockies from the Cardinals, or from the, Diamondbacks and the Reds, outside of the ownership?
Yeah, nothing. I mean, we've got the Reds, the Rockies have a comparable team total. Same with the Diamondbacks. The Giants are on a tier of their own. And then you got teams like the Mariners and the Twins that are a step below, where they're projected for sub 4 runs as far as their team total is concerned, which makes sense because the pitchers in that game are Pablo Lopez and Logan Gilbert. But I mean, we've got the Rockies against Keaton Winn at Coors Field projected for about comparable ownership to the Seattle Mariners against Pablo Lopez and the Minnesota Twins against Logan Gilbert, because people just hate this Colorado Rockies team, which makes sense. It's just the feelings are too strong for the hatred of the Rockies. People should not just be avoiding them on every single slate.
Are they your favorite stack on this 3-gamer?
So I'm rerunning my lineups because we just got an update for the Rockies starting lineup. In my last run, though, they are the team I have the second most exposure to.
I assume San Francisco is still number 1.
I actually had the most exposure to Arizona, but it's just because of leverage purposes. Like, if you're just asking me which team do I think scores the most runs that I like the most, it's the Giants. There just isn't any real leverage there, which kind of takes away some of how I play MLB DFS, particularly for a 3-game slate.
Right. And you pointed this out maybe second day of the season. Like, you go into MLB slates, not you specifically, but anybody should, with the expectations that you're not going to win, because it's all about getting that leverage. With basketball, oftentimes you're still going to be getting, at or around the field on some of the really chalky players. It's just a more projectable sport. With baseball, it's so much different in that respect, that you're not, like, there's a lot of times I feel like baseball, I don't know if you agree with this, from like football to baseball to basketball, all of them. Baseball is the one sport, I think, where you have to be the most comfortable with being uncomfortable when you get your lineup. Like, when you run a Sims, or when you run an optimizer, when you even, the lineup generator, or even like hand building based off the top stacks tool, looking at leverage, top pitchers, and all of that. I feel like you have to be okay being uncomfortable in these spots because a lot of times it's going to go against what your head is telling you to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing NBA DFS. We're rostering the guys that we think are going to score the most fantasy points because it's generally how we go about projecting NBA DFS and how we build lineups. Ownership matters, just not as much as other sports. Whereas MLB, yeah, I'm trying to manipulate ownership, and it's not necessarily who I think is going to do the best. It's how do I think people, offenses, pitchers are going to perform relative to what their ownership is? Where can we find leverage? And yeah, we've got a Coors Field team on a 3-game slate that people aren't playing.
I know. I don't know how much nuance there is outside of that. Like, unless the question becomes, hey, do you have interest in stacking Seattle and Minnesota? And I mean, I think the argument made for that always on a 3-game slate is just, yes, they're not going to be popular, but like Colorado's basically getting the same ownership as Seattle and Minnesota right now. That's what makes it difficult for me.
Yeah. So when I'm looking for leverage on this particular slate, yeah, there's a lot of high owned pitchers. The spots, though, that I'm usually looking to attack, it's not the actual really good starting pitchers that are chalk. So somebody like Hunter Green, I'm more willing to stack against because while Hunter Green is a very good fantasy player and he's a good real life pitcher, there's a clear upside against him because he gets hit hard often. He gives up a lot of home runs. He's just able to offset it from a fantasy purpose by generating a lot of strikeouts. And then same, Keaton Winn isn't really any good as a pitcher. So he's pitching at Coors Field. It's sensible to stack against him. Same way that I felt about Jordan Hicks pitching at Coors Field yesterday. Guys like Logan Gilbert and Pablo Lopez, it's very rare that these guys are going to be having starts where they're giving up, 6, 7, 8 runs and it being some sort of a ceiling game. So there's a scenario where Pablo Lopez doesn't have the best fantasy outing, but it doesn't mean that he got lit up by the Mariners.
Yeah, exactly. Hunter Green seems like the one that's most fringe, where he could go out, give you a bunch of strikeouts, but also get himself into some trouble. Obviously, this game being at a nice park for hitters. Yeah. I don't know how much nuance there is to this slate in general. Like San Francisco, and let me see something real quick. Just see what my stack exposures look like. Also, getting more like 3 and 4 man stacks than I normally would, given, it's a smaller slate, still a decent amount of 5s, but yeah, I'm not getting a ton of Colorado right now, but it still feels like there's no better leverage spot on the slate. I really don't think there is. Unless you, like we said, unless you go Seattle, Minnesota, but the problem there is like, yeah, you have leverage over the field, but you're still going up against 2 really good pitchers, 2 teams that have 3.5 run totals. Big difference there. So it's tough. What type of, before we move on to the main slate, what type of pitching pairings are you getting? Like on a 2-pitcher slate on FanDuel, it's a little bit different, right? Because you're playing one pitcher. It's not nearly the same. It's not nearly as complex at all. But on DraftKings, what are your main pairings when you've got 3 guys that are pretty expensive and then, 2 teams at Coors Field?
Yeah. If you're making Rocky stacks, it's very easy to pair them with 2 stud pitchers. Even though they're at Coors Field, it's a super cheap team. We got this lineup out. It is all right. Let's see these idiots. So we've got at the top of the order, Blackman's $4,600. It's not crazy expensive. McMahon is at $5,600. Every other player in the lineup is sub 5K. And then you've also got Sean Bouchard. He's hitting 5th. He's $3,500. You've got Brendan Rodgers hitting 6th, $3,700. Montero, who's got some pop in his bat, he's $3,400. You got Jordan Beck hitting 9th. He's viable because he's playing at Coors Field. He's 3K. So you have a very cheap stack you can make with the Rockies if you don't include Ryan McMahon in that lineup. It's very easy to go like, hey, I have a Rocky stack. The pitchers are Logan Gilbert and Pablo Lopez, or the pitchers are Hunter Green and Pablo Lopez. It's pretty easy to get 2 stud pitchers with the Rockies.
Are you getting, how much exposure with 150 lineups are you getting to Seattle and Minnesota?
Let's see. I'm about to rerun a sim just because we got a slightly different starting lineup for the Rockies than we had projected, which it probably isn't going to change my exposures all that much, but It could a little bit, but for Seattle, I have 3% 5-man stacks, 1% 4-man stack, and then 6% 3-man stacks. For the Twins, it's basically nothing. 2% 5-man stacks, 2% 4-man stacks, 2% 3-man stacks.
So yeah, there's not much there. Anything else to cover on the early slate?
If we go ahead and just look at some of the stacks, gonna refresh to see if the ownership has changed at all now that we have updated ownership projections. But no, it doesn't really change anything. You got 3 very, very low owned teams: the Rockies, the Mariners, the Twins. Those are your contrarian teams. The Giants, the Reds, the Diamondbacks. Those are your chalkier teams, with the Giants kind of being on a different tier of chalk. So at 26% projected ownership for the Giants, I think it's warranted they have the most ownership on the slate. If we're talking about the Reds versus the Diamondbacks, I prefer the Diamondbacks simply because you're getting more leverage against a very chalky pitcher in Hunter Green, where we have the Reds with a 19% chance to be the top scoring stack, 18% chance for the Diamondbacks. You just get more leverage with Arizona.
You do. Ciccone, though, I mean, this guy, as far as pitchers go on this slate, you're not rostering him at a high clip at all. I mean, he's getting 4%. Quantrill's getting 1%. Keaton Wynn, or I'm sorry, that's on FanDuel. On DraftKings, apologies. On DraftKings, you're probably still not getting much, but yeah, 16% Ciccone, 7% Quantrill, 36% Wynn. I think you hit the nail on the head here. Look, if you come away from this, it's the end of the slate, and Keaton Wynn ends up going 7 scoreless with 8 strikeouts. You go, all right, fine. But 36% ownership there is pretty crazy when you consider all like these other 2 guys, Ciccone and Quantrill, are like obviously Wynn is better than them and arguably still in a better spot. I don't know. I don't really think, yeah, he's better than them and he's in a better spot despite it being Coors. I just don't think he's a 36% owned type of spot when the Rockies are at 12%. Like Pablo Lopez makes a ton of sense. Logan Gilbert obviously makes a lot of sense. Minnesota striking out 24% of the time versus righties, 29% for Seattle, by the way. That is far and away the highest mark in the league. I think the Hunter Green ownership at 3,500, Greg, really just comes down to the fact that he's got great strikeout stuff, because it's not like this is a great matchup. Arizona against righties has not been good this season. 86 WRC plus, 122 ISO. I mean, honestly, they've taken a big step back coming off that World Series loss, but they still are a team that puts the ball in play. With that in mind, 8,600 3-game slate. I do understand Hunter Green. I'd still put him number 3 for me as far as like my top pitchers, but I also think it's still a lot easier. I do think the savings going from Lopez Gilbert to Lopez Green, I still think those savings are pretty significant.
And one other note, we just got the Giants starting lineup, and it's very it's a little bit of a weird, it's different starting lineup than was projected. It happens all the time when there's afternoon games and there's, travel days and whatnot around these as well. But the Giants starting lineup just came out. It's Wade, Estrada, Conforto, Flores, Yastrzemski, Slater, Sabel, Ahmed, and Reitz at catcher. So that means for the Giants that of the players they're projected to be in, Jung-Hoo Lee isn't in the starting lineup. Matt Chapman isn't in the starting lineup. Who else is out of this? Ramos isn't in the starting lineup.
Wow, so this is so what? Then it's super watered down as well. Let me take a look at it.
Yeah, it's a way different lineup than it was projected to be. So it's a little bit worse of a starting lineup, but then on top of that too, it's cheaper. And you guys are going to have to update any lineups that you had built. I just finished running a sim for the Rocky starting lineup, and now I'm going to have to rerun everything for this Giants lineup now, because yeah, it's different.
I had one other thing I want to talk about before we move to the next slate, because we're going to cover both of them. Mm-hmm. And Mark asked, we concerned about the colder weather with wind blowing in at Coors? I did mention that at the top of the show. Yeah, wind blowing in like what, 10, 11 from center field, 49-degree temperatures. It's all baked into the totals. Vegas, it's all baked in. So like if you're looking at this and you still see what a total of 9.5, which isn't great for Coors, but it's a 3-game slate. It's still the highest total on the slate. Then, I mean, yeah, it sucks, but all of that's baked in. My question for you, and by the way, guys, I forgot to mention, but thank you, Andy, for reminding me. Tone for your sins. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. I know it's a crappy slate today, but if you're here, only takes a single second, and we appreciate you for that. So, are you concerned about Hunter Green, given some of these weather concerns in Cincinnati? Like, I'm not concerned about bats. I think one way or another they get the game in, and maybe you see some pinch hit situations if it's an in-game delay and the pitcher gets pulled after a lengthy delay. Are you worried about Hunter Green though in this spot?
So of the 3 chalky pay up pitchers, he's my least favorite of the 3. I prefer getting to Pablo Lopez and I prefer getting to Logan Gilbert. So I'll be underweight to the field on Hunter Green. I'm also most apt to stack against him as compared to stacking against Pablo Lopez or Logan Gilbert. So from that standpoint, I would say like, sure, a little bit of concern relative to the other pitchers, but it not to the point where like I'm avoiding him or anything like that.
I'm looking at the radar now.
And also a good point being made in the chat by Einsteinium. Due to the starting lineup the Giants have, yes, I do think they're more live for pinch hitting because they just have these options to go to on the bench. If there's a high leverage situation, yeah, I think it's fairly likely Matt Chapman comes into the game to pinch hit for somebody.
Yeah, good point. Jeremiah said, I always fade San Francisco on small slates for their immediate pinch hit risk. Yeah, I mean, to your point, to Einsteinium's point, on a slate like this too, with a different lineup with some everyday starters out of it, it just makes it even scarier. Now, I mean, won't matter if they're just gapping triples early in the game, but definitely a concern. So yeah, Mark, to answer your question about the weather at Coors, sucks, but what are your alternatives? Like your alternatives are stacking against Pablo Lopez, Logan Gilbert. Your alternatives are Cincinnati, stacking against Ciccone or stacking Arizona against Green, which both of them make a lot of sense, but you have some weather there. The weather doesn't look that bad though. So maybe you're on to something, Greg. Like maybe looking at this and going, yeah, okay, Arizona, Colorado look like 2 spots just from a sheer leverage perspective that stand out amongst the rest. I think you're right.
So
anyway,
no concerns or be like, oh my God, this is a terrible spot for Hunter. And he's just my least favorite of the 3 pay ups.
Yeah. Yeah. He's less of a sure thing is all it is. I mean, you're still talking about a guy that has a strikeout rate of what, 28%, career 30%. It's good stuff. No doubt about it. And he has given up virtually no power this season at all. I mean, he's thrown 40 and a third innings and given up 2 home runs. That's pretty crazy for a guy pitching at Great American Ballpark.
Yeah. I mean, Hunter Green, he's gonna generate strikeouts. There are going to be days that he gives up runs for sure, though.
All right. Oh, did you see what was his name? With the NBA Sims took down another showdown yesterday. Where was it? Let me find it. Took down another, I saw it on Twitter today, and now I can't find it, but took down, I think like 2 showdowns. Here it is. Took down 2 showdown slates in the matter of a week for like 10K and then 6K. Really crazy, man. And, you know, obviously that's the Stochastic NBA lineup sims, but we have the lineup simulator for MLB, the lineup generator, top stacks, top pitchers, all of that stuff. Crypto Goat, Lil Soupy, sent a few screenshots from these wins the last couple weeks using the Stochastic tools. Jordan, I don't know if, oh, you do have this. I'm just seeing this now. I have to zoom in because he's got so many of them. Is that real? Can you see these or no? Jordan, can you zoom in on these?
Yeah, it's like a catalog of showdown wins.
Dude, I don't think these are all, they might be shut out, I don't know, but 30K, 20K, 15K, 15K, 10K, 10K, 6K, 6K, 5K, 4. He ordered them 4, 3, 1, 1. Unbelievable. That's awesome, dude. Little Soupy, shout out, man. I just saw that right now. Also drives me nuts when people don't have the battery number, like the actual percentage. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know if there still is. There used to be a setting where it just told you how much time was left on the battery. I liked that setting. I don't think it exists anymore, though.
What do you mean how much time was left on it?
There used to be a setting where it wouldn't, instead of it saying like you had 2% battery life left, it would be
Oh,
like
it
a
would give you
car.
like minutes or hours.
Yeah, it would say like you have like 58 minutes of battery life left.
Nice. I don't know. I never used that one.
Yeah, I don't think it
Anyway,
exists anymore.
probably not. Probably just wrong. Dude, I had one where like after a year, my phone was dying by noon with the iPhone X. Ridiculous. This one's not nearly as bad. I forget what this is, but it's better. Anyway, you guys want to check the tools out. Lineup simulator, the post contest simulator. More people need to use that. Like take advantage of that. Really dig in and see if your lineups have been good, even if you're not getting the results, or if they haven't been and you need to change something. Top stacks, top pitchers, all of that. Top hitters tool, ownership. Greg, you always mention it, the premium Discord where you can get some really invaluable information. I think that's it. But like week and a month, you could do either one. Single sport, all sports. If you want to go all access, just use our avatar and you get a huge discount on the entire month, get access to everything. I don't think I'm missing anything, right?
No, and then as always, if you guys are in the Discord channel, you could hit me up over the course of the day or on shows. I know Einstein's in YouTube chat right now. He messages me all the time during shows to answer questions. More people should do that. If you have questions you want answered and you're in our Discord channel, just message me. Just at me in the channel. I always read them and then we answer them on shows.
But yeah, Lil Subi said over 120K in a couple of weeks. I mean, just unreal, dude. Congrats. All right, let's move on to the main slate here. And guys, feel free, you want to come back to this later on in the day for the main slate, however you want to play it. Makes no difference to us as long as you check it out. But Sonny Gray's back on the mound today. That game got washed out yesterday. So, Sonny Gray, who I think is just going to be the clear option up top. Because once you get past him, Greg, it's Reed Detmers against Kansas City, Eric Fetty, Ben Lively, Michael Wacha, and then Tobias Myers. Those are your other 5 pitchers going today. How crazy do you think ownership is going to look on Sonny Gray for the main?
It's going to be pretty high. I don't know that it's going to be anything insane just because he's so much more expensive than everybody else. There's a big price gap between Sonny Gray and the other pitchers. Gray is what, 10,800. Then you got Reed Detmers at 8,700. Eric Fetty is at 8,500. So just because you have to pay an additional $2,100 for Sonny Gray over any of the other pitchers, I think that'll keep him to around 50% ownership. So he's not going to be like 70% owned or anything like that. Because you do see that sometimes on 3-game slates. I kind of like the pitcher pricing for tonight.
It's not bad. Just sucks we have multiple 3-game slates, but yeah, Lively against the White Sox at 7,600. That is one of the reasons that, and Reed Detmers against Kansas City, actually, with his K upside, he's getting about 40%. So it is balanced out a little bit. The crazy thing though, like Michael Wacha is getting 40% against LA. Eric Fetty's getting 21% against the Cleveland Guardians. Tobias Myers is literally the only pitcher on this 3-game main slate or night slate that's not getting any ownership at all against St. Louis.
Yeah, we've got ownership of at least 20% on every single pitcher tonight other than Tobias Myers. Like you just mentioned, he's projected for 6% ownership. And then all of these other guys picking up some sort of ownership. Fetty is only at 21% owned, and then he got 40% on Michael Wacha, 47% owned Ben Lively, 49% owned Sonny Gray. That's also one of the other impacts of Sonny Gray being as expensive as he is. It balances out the ownership, because if he was cheaper and he was like 70% owned, then you would have a lot of other pitchers who are low owned. But instead, we only have this one guy in Tobias Myers that isn't picking up ownership. And I think there's good reason he's not picking up ownership. He's 25 years old. This is somebody who's not considered a real prospect. He's been terrible so far in the big leagues. He's a 6.23 ERA, 5.28 expected ERA. He doesn't generate strikeouts. He He doesn't get ground balls either. He only has a 33% ground ball rate with a 26.3% home run to fly ball rate. And a lot of his numbers are terrible in the minor leagues. Last year in Double-A, where he made 27 appearances, he had a 5.03 ERA, 5.06 FIP. The year before in Triple-A with Cleveland, he had a 6 ERA, 6.14 FIP. This guy sucks. He's simply not a big league pitcher.
Are you buying into the Ben Lively strikeout numbers this year? He's faced, and I want to preface this, right? He's faced Boston, Atlanta, and the Angels. So it's not like he's had, in the division, right? Like a Minnesota, 2 White Sox, and then somewhere else in the American League, like getting Seattle. It's not exactly like he's had the greatest spots. Now, he's been good. This is a guy that was, in the Korean League. He entered the major league system at rookie ball 2013. So he's clearly been around for a while. He's got a 29% strikeout rate through his first 4 starts this year.
So let me look more at, I've got Ben Lively's numbers pulled up here. And like you mentioned, we've seen an increased strikeout rate. Let's see why, though. It's not because of the velocity. His velocity is still low, 90.6 miles per hour. Is his average with the fastball velocity. Is his pitch mix different? Is he generating more swing and misses? Let's see. He's pitching against the White Sox. So that in itself is going to mean there's reason to want to get exposure to him.
75 WRC plus against righties this year, 118 ISO, 275 WOBA. I mean, that is pitiful.
All right. He has a 9.6% swinging strike rate. I'm pretty skeptical that he's going to continue to strike guys out at this clip.
Yeah, me too. Let me see what his, here, let me see something real quick. No, I mean, his called strike rate is only 17.8%. I thought he might just be getting like crazy, but his called plus swinging strike rate is 27.5%, which is, nothing crazy. I'm skeptical too.
Yeah,
I'm very skeptical.
How many starts? What's the sample size here?
4 starts. But like I said, Boston, Atlanta, Angels. It's not like he's just mowed down bad opponents.
I mean, the more we talk about Ben Lively and look at some of these numbers, like it's a 3-game slate tonight. It makes sense to roster him. In single entry, I'm most apt to be stacking the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah. Okay.
Lowest owned team on the slate. Ben Lively is the second most popular pitcher. In single entry, he's probably going to be somewhere around 70% owned. The White Sox are probably going to be like 4 or 5% owned in single entry. This is just not the caliber of a pitcher who should be uber chalk.
I like where your head is at. I just do not like this White Sox team. They're so bad.
They suck.
Might not matter.
I've only been stacking the shittiest teams imaginable lately.
Yeah.
It's gone pretty well, though. The Rockies came through yesterday.
Yeah, Washington came through in a big way over the weekend. Oakland came through. I'm not saying they're the shittiest teams imaginable, but Oakland's like 2 games below 500 right now. You may have mentioned that yesterday, that they actually haven't been that bad. They really have not been that bad of a team. So, that's how it goes. But you realize, dude, it's not just Ben Lively. Michael Wacha's getting 40%. Reed Detmer's at 8,700 against Kansas City team that's really not that bad. He's getting around 40%. So, if the idea is to stack the White Sox, what do you make of the Angels and Kansas City against 2 other 40% owned pitchers?
Yeah, so if we look at the other popular pitchers on the slate, like Reed Detmers and Michael Wacha, there's a couple of things that I view as being different compared to the Ben Lively chalk. Most notably, Reed Detmers is very good. He's not somebody who I think it's much more likely the White Sox would have success against Ben Lively than the Royals would have success against Reed Detmers. And then as far as the Angels against Michael Wacha, the Angels offense might be worse right now than the White Sox offense.
It's bad.
Now that Mike Trout is gone, This offense is, I mean, this offense was bad last year when they had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. If you remember at the end of last year, we saw once Ohtani was getting shut down, even when Ohtani was in, the pitchers were regularly chalk against the Angels offense, and they were just never really able to do anything. I mean, Michael Wacha, 39% ownership. And also I think Wacha is a better pitcher than Ben Lively.
I do too. I'm just pointing out that like there's a few spots that aren't exactly that wouldn't exactly garner big ownership if the slate was even a little bit bigger than this. Like I think all of these spots are, you know, the thing about Reed Detmers too, and this has been the case with him, he's never given up a lot of power. He's just not been able to work efficiently through games. Like you know, he would run pitch counts up and you'd be like, oh, nice. He has 8 strikeouts, but he's not getting out of the 5th inning. That hasn't been the case this year. Like he's been a lot more efficient, right? He's been able to get through, you know, I'm looking at a few starts ago, 7 frames under 100 pitches, 5 2/3 and 95, 6 1/3 and 98. He hasn't thrown 100 pitches this year, but he has actually been more efficient. And that is pretty encouraging, knowing that he's got good strikeout stuff. So, yeah, against Kansas City, it looks like a good spot. What's their implied total? 4.4, 4.3 for the LA. Actually, hold on. Let me look in our tools to make sure.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, just some numbers on Michael Wacha, who does have a 5.5 ERA this year, but he has a 350 BABIP as well as a 66% strand rate. So when those things regress, I think we're back to looking at a pitcher who's going to have an ERA somewhere in like the low 4s, high 3s, or something like that. He's a 4.45 expected ERA. He's a 3.85 FIP. In 2023, did have a 3.22 ERA. In 2022, he had a 3.32 ERA. So this is a guy who's pretty consistently been solid the last couple of years. Not a world beater or anything like that. But I think once the dust settles and some of the bad luck metrics that he's been seeing even out, then he's probably going to be closer to, if you look at the projections, like Steamer has him 4.43 ERA the rest of the year. Zips has him 4.39. That's probably more in line with where he's going to be at going forward.
Yeah. Now that I'm seeing this and us talking through it, I actually understand why all 3 of those guys are getting similar ownership, because Reed Detmers is better than the others, but he's also, you know, 1,100 more than Lively, 1,600 more than Wacha. Ben Lively has the matchup, right? Ben Lively clearly has the best matchup, so he's going to pull ownership. And then Michael Wacha is the cheapest, but he only has an 18% strikeout rate. If you were to order them, how would you do it? Because honestly, for me, I actually think I would still go Lively first, as gross as it seems, then Detmers, then Wacha, and only Wacha 3 because I don't think he has particularly good strikeout stuff here. And that is a bit concerning to me. I mean, 4 or fewer strikeouts in 5 straight starts. And while the Angels aren't good, I think we all know that the Angels are not a particularly good team right now. I mean, they're bad. Yeah, they plated 14 runs over the last 2 games, but you know, anything can happen. They're like middle of the road in K rate. It should come up now that they're just throwing garbage into the lineup. But I'm having a tough time really drawing like a distinct differentiation between any of the 3.
Yeah, I go Detmers 1, Wacha 2, and then I would go Lively 3. And it's mostly just because of the ownership on Lively. In particular, if people are playing in single entry type stuff, I really do think Lively is going to end up being like 60 to 70% owned in those contests.
Are you interested in paying 8,500 for Eric Fetty?
On a 3-game slate, yes. I think that Eric Fetty also has shown that he's made some signs of improvement, which we've seen a lot with pitchers who go and pitch overseas. They come back, they made adjustments, they're different sorts of guys. That was something that Belman was talking about earlier in the year as being a possibility with Fetty. And he has a 3.46 ERA, a 3.67 expected ERA. He's a career best 25% strikeout rate. He's a career low 8.5% walk rate. There's a lot of really positive signs with Eric Fetty. And, you know, I don't think he's going to be a Cy Young candidate or anything like that. But I think there's a pretty good case to be made that of all the pitchers we just talked about, he might be the second best guy this year behind only Reed Detmers.
Probably has been, yeah. Well, I mean, Lively has been very good, but I don't know if that's sustainable. Look, the concern I have with Fetty, and again, I'm not really saying anything that isn't bearing out in our ownership, honestly. Like, and all of that. The only thing with Fetty for me is that this is a very difficult strikeout matchup. Like Cleveland has the second lowest K rate in baseball. He's 8,500. It's possible you just get those Ks, but it is crazy. And I'm sure you've noticed this. Look how much positive leverage he has, particularly compared to the leverage on Lively, Waka, and Detmers. I don't want to ignore that. Like he has 11% positive leverage, 32% top two pitcher probability on DraftKings, 21% ownership.
Yeah, we have Lively, Detmers, Fetty, and Waka all projected very closely together. Not a whole ton that separates them. And Fetty is by far the lowest owned of those four.
Huh.
21%
Top pick. Some of your
ownership.
friends live in Warminster. I played hockey in Warminster growing up, brother. Face off. Face off. We were the Glaciers. Yeah. BD, when you guys do single entry, how do you decide what stacks to play, lowest owned or best matchups, etc.? That's a good question, Greg, for a slate like this. If you're doing single entry stuff, what type are you, how much different is your process from like multi-entering?
Yeah, it's very different. So the number one thing I like to play the most in single entry is I start by trying to figure out how is the ownership going to be different for the pitchers and the hitters in single entry compared to large field tournaments. And if I can, these are the spots I want to be attacking. I want to be attacking the most popular pitcher in single entry that I think has potential to be blown up. So yesterday, for instance, if you guys watched live before lock, who did I stack in single entry last night? It was the Colorado Rockies. Why did I stack the Rockies? Not a single part of that analysis had anything to do with how good or bad I thought the Rockies were. It was the fact that they were projected for 1% ownership on a smallish slate at Coors Field, and Jordan Hicks was projected to be the third most popular pitcher on the slate. In general, chalk ends up being more magnified in single entry contests. So if you're looking at our top stacks tool, in general, the most chalky stack is going to be about double the ownership that they are in large field tournaments compared to single entry stuff. So if you have like a Giants team that's playing in Coors Field, they're projected for 16% ownership in large field tournaments. They're probably going to be somewhere around 30% owned in single entry sort of stuff. So make those kind of assumptions. And then I'm still looking at the top stack odds in the top stacks tool, the top pitcher odds. I'm just changing what I think their projected ownership is going to be for single entry. And then I'm using those tools to make decisions. And then I'm using that in coordination with the Sims to find, all right, if I want to stack the Rockies, what's my highest ROI projected Rockies stack?
Right. But it also doesn't mean that like, just because you're in a single entry that, you're going to go out and go, okay, well, I'm definitely stacking Milwaukee because they're the lowest owned stack.
Yeah, it's not just the lowest owned. I'm still trying to figure out like what's the best leverage spot, which are the pitchers that are going to be under-owned and what offense could potentially be under-owned or give me leverage. It's just I'm changing what the projected ownership numbers are to make a different kind of assumption about the best spot to get to.
Like to actually put this into practice, single entry today, my guess, main slate, you'd be looking definitely at some White Sox, like positively leveraged by a decent margin, tied for the lowest ownership among any stack on a 3-game slate. And Ben Lively's almost 50% owned. So like that would be a perfect representation of what you're talking about just on this slate alone.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that you have like the highest scoring team on any individual day. So you could have a situation like I played the Rockies yesterday. Were they very likely to succeed? No, that's why they were 2% owned in contests. But on the flip side, if you do get a day like yesterday where the Rockies end up scoring 6 runs, well, now I finished top 20 in the GP in the $121 GPP. I got a really good return on that kind of money. Whereas if you're just playing a really chalk team that goes off, you're competing with so much of the field that not only do you need that team to go off, you need your individual lineup to be better than everybody else's lineup. So you could play a super chalky team in single entry. They could be the highest scoring team on the slate. and you still finish out of the cash line. Whereas if you're playing a leverage team against a chalk pitcher, if that team is any somewhat of a decent outing, you could almost guarantee that you're going to be at least doubling your money in single entry for that day.
Absolutely. Let's wrap it up with some stacks here. Why not, right? Also, I tell you guys every day, free squares we've got going on at Sleeper. If you're a new user, you want to check it out. And the best deposit bonus among any pick'em site in the industry, $500 first match deposit bonus, instant deposit bonus too. So you have 500, throw it in, you got 1,000 now. You have 100, now you have 200. You know, multiply by 2, just double whatever you're putting in up to 500. Doesn't need to be 500. What are the free squares today? Let me pull this up. I assume we got something for basketball for sure with 2 NBA games. Let's see. Thursday. Okay, Logan Gilbert, discount down to a half a strikeout from 5.5. Solid.
Good.
And Jason Tatum down to half a point. So there you go. 2 free squares if you're a new user. Link in the description and in chat. Get a big deposit bonus. Get the free squares. Take advantage of their multipliers with the dynamic pricing. Able to take, stats, unlike just the typical, hits or whatever. With baseball, having the multiplier is huge because oftentimes you have so much juice on either side of a line, or with home runs, doubles, stolen bases. Now you can do that with the multipliers up to 100x your entries. Very, very cool platform over there, and a real nice app to use as well. So check it out. Link in the description. Get the bonus, get the free squares at Sleeper. Let's talk about our favorite stacks for this slate before we get out of here. You already, dug pretty deep into the White Sox. Past the White Sox, though, is there anything that's just jumping off the page at you? Because if you look at top stack probabilities, Greg, for this main slate, it's 22% Kansas City, 21% is on DraftKings, 21% Cleveland, 20% St. Louis, 15% Angels, then 12% White Sox, 10% Milwaukee.
So the White Sox for sure. Boy, it's really hard to differentiate some of these other teams, though.
Very.
I think I'm most inclined to say the Cardinals, mostly because I just have no interest in rostering Tobias Myers either. It's just so easy for me to get to a team when I'm not going to be playing that pitcher at all. When, they've got comparable top stack odds to the Royals, to the Guardians. They also have the same ownership. So 2 teams I think I'll be stacking the most tonight, depending on lineups, are going to be the White Sox and the Cardinals.
The other one would be like, what do we do? What do we do with the Cleveland Guardians against Eric Fetty? Like, this is a guy who did give up a lot of power. And to be fair, even this season, Fetty's giving up a good amount of power, right? Like, he's coughed up 7 home runs already in 7 starts. That is a real thing. It's entirely possible that this just ends up being a relatively low scoring slate. Fetty coughs up a couple long balls, doesn't go deep, and Cleveland has a field day against the bullpen as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have them with the highest overall top stack odds, so that'll probably make them my 3rd favorite stack on the slate. It's just unfortunate that there's without the ownership going to Fetty, you're not getting the kind of leverage that you are on some of the other stacks, like the White Sox, for instance.
Yeah, it's true. Anything else, or do we give a home run play before we get in here?
I think we can do some home run plays here.
Or before we get out of here, I should say. All right. Let's do it. Do you have anyone just straight off the top of your head?
Well, we're going to have to avoid Coors Field because we're not pussies. So we're not just going to go ahead and pick somebody at Coors Field at a home run. Who do I want to go to instead? I think I should be picking against Hunter Green. Just if we're talking in the idea of leverage, and then also the fact that Hunter Green is a pitcher who's very home run prone, gives up a lot of fly balls. He throws hard, hard in, hard out. All right, so let me think. A Diamondbacks hitter.
Corbin Carroll is going to be my guy, but go ahead.
Jock Peterson. I picked him last night. He didn't homer. I'm going back to the well with Jock Peterson.
That's a good one. I feel like Corbin Carroll might have a little added juice now that he's batting above the 7 hole, back in the leadoff spot too, Greg. But I like that. Also, I guess the question now is, do I go to somebody against Saccone, which wouldn't be that tough to do? Like De La Cruz? Yeah, we'll go there. If you're going to Arizona, I'll go Cincinnati, and we'll leave it at that. Hey, you can follow Greg at GRenberg DFS, me at Laffy_D on Twitter. Appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Don't forget, NBA Live Before Lock later tonight and on playback. You can watch it there, then hang with the fellas afterwards. A lot of fun. It's totally free, and they've got an awesome platform. Also, no delay, no delay whatsoever. So, like, everything we say, you hear it immediately, and the chat is all synced up. It's a beautiful thing. We'll catch you back here tomorrow, MLB Strategy Show, to close out the week. Peace.